So humility, I think, is a big thing. My marriage took a huge good turn when I learned to say, instead of you are doing this, I learned to say, so it seems to me like this is happening, but, and it feels really bad to me, but I could be wrong. Can you help me understand?
Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Hello there. You are listening to episode number 125 of the Girls Talking Life podcast. The podcast is about to turn 5. I can't even believe that it's been that long. Next month, I will be celebrating by giving you the chance to win gifts. I have partnered with some amazing and thoughtful women for a birthday giveaway full of terrific items, plus an Amazon gift card, all that center on the theme of growing your faith. Be sure you are on my mailing list or are following me on Instagram so you know how and when to enter. Links to both of those are in the show notes for today's episode. Is there a breakdown in communication between you and your husband? Do you struggle to speak honestly about how you're feeling? We are continuing our Strengthen Your Marriage series today, and we're focusing on communication. How we interact with our husbands will either build our marriages up or tear them down. But honest, humble communication is not easy. So I've invited licensed marriage and family therapist Heather Bjur to join me. She helps us understand why we might react the way we do, how humility can change our relationships, how our thoughts shape what we say, and how to begin to become emotionally honest. Heather is a licensed marriage and family therapist at Valley Christian Counseling in Fargo, North Dakota. She's also a certified clinical trauma professional who offers EMDR and emotionally focused therapy. Additionally, Heather holds a certificate in spiritual direction through the late Dr. Harry Crabb's New Way Ministries. Heather's deepest passion in life is seeing people find emotional and spiritual healing through the freedom and grace of Jesus. Everything she and I talk about can be found on girlstalkinglife.com. Here is my conversation with Heather. Heather, welcome to Girls Talking Life. I am so glad that you're here talking to me today.
I am so glad to be here.
We are in a series on marriage, and, things can be great. Things can be so great and need a little tune-up, but there is always room for improvement, I feel like.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And you are a marriage and family therapist, so who better to ask than someone who helps married couples?
Yeah.
You say, if I haven't lived it, I don't teach it.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, because I feel like I'm not effective if I haven't been through it. I can speak to things, but I don't feel like I can be as effective unless I've lived it, and I've lived enough. So.
Well, that's my first question for you. Tell me a little bit about your story and then how you came to be in this line of work.
Yeah. So, a million years ago, I got engaged to a fellow that I had been dating when I was a senior in high school, and, hadn't even really wanted to date him. And then we ended up getting married, and, it was just not a good situation. And so I found myself at, 23 being divorced. And I was a brand new Christian, and I just knew that I didn't know enough about relationships. I didn't understand enough about how God works in our lives. I didn't understand so much of that. So I went to seminary, because that's what you do when you get divorced at 23, you go to seminary, right? And I feel like that's really where this wonderful journey began. I, for one thing, wanted to help people not make the same mistake I did. I would call myself a recovering codependent. I have a lot of people-pleasing tendencies, that type of thing. And so that probably is what got me into the marriage that I didn't really want to be in. And I just couldn't say that, when I was 19, 20, I felt like, oh, I don't want to hurt him. Well, my goodness, that's so ridiculous, That's really so self-centered is what that was. That was about me, I didn't want to be the bad guy. So anyway, so I went to seminary, I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And actually I just realized last month was my 20th anniversary of my first client ever. So
Wow.
I know that feels just so impossible that much time has gone by. So I graduated from Bethel Seminary in St. Paul, and now I work at Valley Christian Counseling Center in Fargo, North Dakota, and I have been there for the better part of 13 years, I want to say, and it's just been a wonderful thing. So I'm licensed now. I've been licensed for, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. And I work with individuals, couples, an occasional family. I don't do a whole lot of family stuff, and not a lot of families really want counseling, to be honest. But I would say the bulk of it is women wanting help with their relationships, to be honest, is what my clients are.
If you had to make a top 3 chart of the things that you see most often in marriages, and if you're like, if we could just get these 3 things right, marriages would be all set. What would
gosh.
if you're able to?
Yeah, that's a tall order. If we could just get these 3 things right. Well, for one thing, so much of our relationship struggles have so much to do with our attachment styles, and those things are formed when we're, that's in like infancy and toddler years. And so while those things can be healed, they often really show up in our romantic relationships. And that's where things get really bumpy. And we don't know this, how do we know, nobody goes into marriage thinking, well, I have an avoidant attachment style, so I should probably pair up with someone who has blah, 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 so we just don't do that. But what happens then is that typically we find, I would say the vast majority of the couples that come into my office and probably to my colleagues' offices for help, have what's going on, what I would call like a pursuer distancer issue in the relationship. So there's always one person who is more anxious, who has a more anxious attachment style, who is going to be the pursuer. They want to know things are okay. They want to know what's going on, what their partner is thinking. Why did they do this? Like, are we okay? Like that type of stuff, and wanting to fix things and wanting to make sure. There's usually a lot of anxiety in terms of like, even, is the house clean enough? Is their partner helping enough? Is that type of stuff. And the vast majority of those pursuers are women. Now, granted, it's not always the case. There are men who are the pursuers, but it is by far the woman who is the pursuer, and then typically the man is the distancer. And so what happens then is she pursues. And so then, and he, in his own anxiety or his own typically avoidant attachment style or some form of anxious attachment, he will then, as she gets closer, he backs up. And that looks like a million different things, but it all comes down to, because sometimes it can be everything from he's trying to get her to stop. So he like leaves the situation physically, he leaves the situation emotionally, he leaves the situation verbally by like, he attacks her. And I'm using, he and her pronouns because this is just the typical, the stereotype. And so I'm just going with that. So forgive me if that doesn't fit your situation. But, so the pursuer the distancer then, gets just like flooded, can't deal with it, can't engage, doesn't know how to respond. She gets then the pursuer gets more and more and more upset, and the distancer gets more and more disengaged. And so then there's just this constant battle. And then things have to cool down because the distancer is so overwhelmed. And then the pursuer is just left all of her emotions and fear and everything. And so that is why I am in the process of getting trained and certified in emotionally focused therapy, which is a wonderful form of therapy created specifically for couples by Sue Johnson. She's this lovely British therapist, but it treats that underlying emotional stuff that we can't get to because we're just going off of behaviors and reactions. So that's kind of my big, that's the big number one, I guess I would call it. Then the next thing would be humility. I think we, especially as women, we like to think that we can kind of interpret what our spouses or our significant other is, what their motivation is or what they're thinking. I can't tell you how many times, and I know I've done it myself. Oh, well, I think he was doing this because, or I think he meant this, by this thing that he had this look or he had this tone or whatever. And while those things are extremely valid and extremely valuable, we don't know always And so sometimes I think we can ascribe things to others that aren't always true. And it gives us kind of a sense of control, or like, I know what's going on. I think it can lead to a sense even of a little bit of arrogance, because to assume that we know what's happening in our spouse, we just can't. So humility, I think, is a big thing. My marriage took a huge good turn when I learned to say, instead of you are doing this, I learned to say, so it seems to me like this is happening, and it feels really bad to me, but I could be wrong. Can you help me understand? So there's something that's from, why are you doing this? You're hurting me. Stop it, blah, 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 to it feels like this is happening, but I could be wrong. So because I don't know, everything in time and space, so that piece, that humility piece is huge. And then I think maybe the last one is just, how do we communicate? How do we, and then and our communication comes from our thoughts. So what are we thinking, not only about ourselves, but about our significant other? Like, what are our thoughts throughout the day? I noticed that when I became a part-time stay-at-home mom when my kids were really, really little, I've been married now for 19 years to my husband, Chris. I would notice like he would leave crap on the counter after he made his lunch. I would find his socks and underwear on the floor. And then I get like this negative thought process going on. And then like from there, we know most of us are a little bit familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's like where our thoughts go, our feelings go. And there's a lot of truth to that. And so I found myself stuck in these really negative thoughts about him. And then he'd come home and I'd just be I'd have this like attitude, or this like, maybe even like a bitterness, like I'm here taking care of these kids and this is so hard. And I'm, full of anxiety and you can't even pick up your cheese wrapper, like that. I joke that was literally a thing. He would leave like a Velveeta cheese wrapper on the counter. I'd be like, cheese wrappers. But yeah, to be cautious of what you're thinking.
Okay. Let's go back to the first one.
Yeah.
You talked about the pursuer and the distancer.
Yeah.
What is a step or two that you can take in those situations to kind of come together?
Yeah. So I think that actually can include one of our next questions here that has to do with emotional honesty.
Yeah.
And so part of this is being able to understand what's really going on deep inside of us when we feel we need to pursue. And so that might look like, I feel really insecure right now. And so I want reassurance. I want to feel better. But in my uninformed pursuing, that's going to actually freak the other person out. And so, if you're really stuck in those rigid styles of, pursuing and distancing. And so how do we have to kind of pause and become aware enough of, okay, this isn't just that he did something wrong or he like hurt us. I mean, those things can certainly be the case, but what actually got triggered? Like, okay, so something was said or something wasn't said that should have been said, stuff like that. And then the angst that rises up inside of us, because typically the pursuer has more of an anxious attachment style. But then, so really, what are the needs there? And if we can learn to now, this is big for a lot of folks. I would say most, if we can learn to take our anxious attachment to God and learn how to, because it actually, there's a lot of interesting information out there right now. There's even a new book, and I'll think of the name in a minute, but I think it's just called Attachment to God. And the man's name is like Crispin something. I'll think of it in a second, but our attachment style to people is typically also the same with God. And so if we can learn to just lay our emotions, lay our anxiety at his feet and not just like in terms of like, oh, I'm just going to go dump this on him and then I'll be fine. Like, no, we have to like go like, God, remind me who I am. God, remind me like, where am I going with this? Where are you taking me? Where are you taking us? All is not lost. He is in control. I just got to hear Susie Larson speak. She made the comment that a friend had told her several years ago when she was just really in a pit. The friend had said, if your first thought about yourself when you think about God isn't surely goodness and mercy follow me all the days of my life, then something's amiss. And I was like, wow, like that's so good, because that's so scriptural. And the person who is anxious is not going to have those thoughts. So I know that I'm taking this like off in a really, really deep direction right now, but I think that there's because our relationship with God often mirrors our relationship with those closest to us, I think there's a piece of that we have to pay attention to too.
Yeah, definitely. And humility, the second one,
Yeah.
that connects with our relationship with God as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was number 3? Communication.
Communication, and thoughts, like where our thoughts go, like what are we thinking about? And what we know now about neuroplasticity, it's so amazing. We know more about our brains than we ever have known, in history, is that when we think a thought, so if I'm upset with my husband because he's leaving stuff around and I feel like taken for granted because of that, if I start thinking those thoughts quite a bit, I'm going to create a neuropathway in my brain, which is kind of like a riverbed that gets carved out, like because the water just flows and flows and flows, and sometimes it flows a little to the left and sometimes it flows, and it makes it really wide and it makes it really deep. And it's the very same thing that happens in our brains, this with these neural pathways, that what we think more of. And so we have to make an intentional effort to think intentional thoughts about whatever we want to, whatever we're focusing on. And so like, if I'm stuck in a negative pattern with my husband and, thinking like, oh, he doesn't care about me and he doesn't care about, me being stuck at home with the kids and my anxiety, and he's not being responsible, and I can just go so down a rabbit hole with that, then that's where I'm going to stay. And I'm going to keep thinking those thoughts. But if I notice, because first we have to notice, because those thoughts, they start to like come unbidden. Like they just happen. They're automatic. We have to notice what we're thinking and then say, okay, so this isn't where I want to go with this. I need to choose something different. What do I choose? So, we think about taking thoughts captive. We think about, focusing on whatever is pure, good, lovely, admirable, all of those things. And so the fact that, okay, so he's not home right now and he didn't take care of his things means that maybe that he has a lot of confidence in me, or that he's really busy and he's making money for us, or, like there's different things that we can focus on, but we have to make sure that they are true and believable and not just like pie in the sky type of stuff. And so then we can replace those old negative thoughts and with some of that are believable and true. And then things can start to change. Then we create new neural pathways. It's very powerful. It's incredible stuff.
So the same way that you can kind of snowball in your thoughts down
Absolutely.
the negative path, you can practice
Yes.
to go the positive route. And that then can also kind of snowball in that better direction.
It can, just like, I think about, so when you take your kids to the park and there's sidewalks, going towards the slide, and there's sidewalks going towards the swings, then maybe there's not a sidewalk going to the merry-go-round. And so the kids have created like a little path, in the grass, and it's just the same thing. We have to create that path. And the more well-worn, or the more we walk that path, the more well-worn it becomes, the easier that it is to think those positive things. And again, I'm not talking like rainbows and unicorns. I don't want us to be like, oh, everything's fine when it's not, but what are the true things? Because there's always some good in there somewhere.
My husband is a napper. And after a hard day at work, when he is taxed mentally and emotionally, he needs a nap. And it used to drive me crazy, especially when our kids were little. I felt like I needed more help during, that particular time of day. And they are bigger now, so it's a little different. But
Totally.
Flipping the switch in my head to say, you know what? I am serving him in this way. He needs to go do that. He has served our family all day long with his job.
Sure.
And now I can bless him with that time that he needs to rejuvenate.
Yes. And then hopefully when he's had his nap, and that hopefully isn't too long, then he's able to enter in and be present, like it's like if he has that chance to rejuvenate, then, and if he didn't, maybe it would be a crappy evening, like maybe things would go south real fast. I don't know. But yeah, it's like, maybe I really want him to have this nap.
Yes. And that was exactly true. Talk to me about how shame prevents honest communication.
Oh, goodness. I heard Ian Cron, he's one of the Enneagram gurus out there now. He said a number of years ago on his podcast, Typology, I heard him say, and I will never forget this. He said, if love is the greatest force in the universe, shame is a close second. And I think that is so incredibly true, because shame it's a universal experience. Obviously, because of the fall, we all are going to experience shame in some way, shape, or form. And funny, we experience them more similarly, most of us, than differently, but we all have our own flavor of it. But shame makes us want to hide. And so certainly we don't want to be honest when we are in, that the power of shame, when we're stuck in hiding mode. And what actually strengthens shame is hiding. That's actually what keeps it keeps us locked into, I can't let this happen. I can't let this, I have to wear a mask, like an emotional or I certainly don't mean a physical mask, but just like I have to pretend everything is okay when it's not. It's what prevents us at church from knowing and really being known by other people. It's like, oh, hi, my mask meets your mask and no one is touched. No one is changed. No one is loved because we can't be honest. And so shame's kryptonite, and I'm sure it's Brene Brown or some, she talks about this all the time. I'm not sure if her word is kryptonite, but that's my word. So if it's her word, I apologize. But shame's kryptonite is exposure. And so to bring our stuff to light in front of another trusted person is the place maybe where that can begin for us. And sometimes that's a counselor's office. I know that that's where it happened for me. Like I had to know that I was not going to be sent out the door. Like, oh, that's enough, Heather. You've said too much, like, bye. I had to know that I was secure in the relationship, in the care that I was receiving from my counselor in order for me to begin to just, kind of, I like to say, barf up all the stuff. We need that trust. We need that security in order to feel safe. And if in our marriages or relationships, we're not feeling real safe, it's going to be hard for us to be honest, And so honesty, then, learning to be honest, learning to sort of like expose ourselves is the beginning. And maybe that's not with our spouse or our family member or our friend, maybe that is with, I don't know, a mentor, a counselor, a pastor, something like that. And so that can lead us though to a greater ability to be honest and open and vulnerable and then intimate, because that's what the outcome of honesty is greater intimacy in whatever area that you're looking at, whether it's your marriage or your whatever, your friendships, your family members. But I think a lot of times the church tells us subtly, not like, I don't think this is anything that's like ever, this isn't what's heard from the pulpit or anything like that, but we get these messages that it's not okay to be not okay, or it's not okay to be messy, to have stuff in our lives that need to be worked on. But I'm sorry, that's everyone. Everyone has stuff. Everyone either struggles with, like, say, depression or anxiety. Everyone, if they're not dealing with that, they're dealing with a relationship issue or a family or a kid. If it's not that, it's probably some sort of addiction. I mean, like, to be human is to be addicted. I think that's another Ian Cron quote, maybe Gerald May. It might be Gerald May, but, because we are away from our true love. We are away from our home. And so we fill that gap. We fill those holes with stuff. And while we're always, I'm sure, trying to move away from that stuff, it's just we live in a hard place, and learning to be open and emotionally honest, then, emotional honesty then would be like, I don't know how I feel about God. I don't know how I feel about you. I don't know how I feel about me. I don't, and I don't like this, and learning to let those more negative emotions come to light. Like, that's where the healing begins. That's where the good stuff is. Like, that's, when I have clients that come in and can be like, just as raw and real and honest, like, I'm like, all right, let's get into it. Like, this is the good stuff. Like, I'm like cheering, like, let's be honest.
And you said that can happen separately. You don't even need to be speaking with the husband too. You, absolutely, as a counselor, can just talk to a woman and have her heal in those areas and then go back to her marriage.
Yes. So there's something about having a relationship where you are fully accepted, where you begin to be known, where those spots in our lives that feel like we have to hide them or clean them up or whatever, but maybe we're not very successful at cleaning them up. When it feels like, okay, I don't have to perform all the time. I don't have to get this right all the time. I get to be human, because, and this is one of my favorite sayings, we're human before we're Christian. Like, we we're humans and humans are messy and we're not perfect. And even at the best that we try and the best that we do, we're still going to have some goofy stuff. We're going to still have some feelings about things. I think even if we don't have, addiction and all sorts of other things going on, we're still going to have lots of messy feelings about things. And that's okay. So finding a place where you can just be you and you can know that you can be accepted. And then, then how do we turn that around and start to bring that into our homes? That's the secondary healing component. Yeah.
So when is it time to seek counseling, either on your own or with your spouse? And should everyone be in counseling?
Yeah, well, I feel like if folks are able to resolve their conflict and resolve their differences, and both parties feel good about the way that it's resolved, then I would say you're probably doing pretty good. Does everybody need a tune-up now and then? Sure. I think that's a great idea. But I think that's going to happen at different points in life, like whether it's empty nesting or even just having your first baby. There's a lot of, different threshold moments, I think, that can bring out stuff. And so, yeah, I would say if you feel like you see the same patterns over and over again, or you're recycling the same issues, and maybe you have this big all out brawl and then things feel better for a few days. Don't trust that. That's not going to last, especially if it's happened, several times. That'll make you feel good. The other person, if you've complained to him, so to speak, about something that he's doing or not doing, and he kind of shapes things up for a few days, but then goes back, like that's going to be a pattern. And it doesn't have to be the man. It can be, it's vice versa. I'm not trying to, speak poorly about the men, because I don't feel that way. But I think that if you're seeing repeated behaviors, repeated patterns, recycling the same issues, ding, 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 that's going to be your red flag.
I would like to change gears a bit and ask you for your favorite 5. Love to know you a little bit better on a personal level. So Heather, tell me, what are 5 things that you are watching or doing or wearing right now that are your favorites?
Okay. So I'm a big fan of Bubbler. I don't know if that's if they have Bubbler all across the country, but that's my favorite drink. And I just discovered these beeswax, 100% beeswax candles from this little company called Big Dipper Waxworks. I've really gotten away from scented candles and soy and all of that stuff, because there's just junk in them that I don't want in my lungs. Right. And so I just got these lovely beeswax candles, and it smells just a little bit like honey, and I love it. And well, right now it's peach season. And so I just picked up a big crate of peaches straight from Colorado, and they are big and fat and juicy. And I found this recipe for peach pecan bread, and I literally am going to go make that when I get off the Zoom call with you. I'm a big fan of dessert breads.
That sounds amazing.
I know, right? And so the 4th one for me is Crunchy Makeup. It's a brand that is probably the cleanest makeup out there. And so I use their foundation, and it comes in a whole bunch of different tints, and it's really good for your skin. And it's got none of the junk in it that can build up in our systems and kind of mess with our hormones and stuff like that. So
yeah, I love clean products. I have not heard of that.
Yeah, it's really good. And my last one is Susie Larson's latest book, Closer Than Your Next Breath. We got pre-release books at our counseling center since she was coming in this week, and there's a bunch of us that are going through it on Tuesday mornings, and it's really sweet. She's such a fantastic lady, such a great speaker. She's on Faith Radio and out of the Twin Cities, and I mean it's syndicated, so I'm sure it's across the nation, and certainly online, and the podcast apps and all of that. But when I listen to her, she has a steadfastness in Jesus. She has a certainty about who he is. She has a surety that he, just a certainty in who he is. And it's so wonderful to listen to. I feel like she increases my faith, which I believe, that's like a spiritual gift, maybe it's her faith that increases my faith, but she's believable, and she's somebody that I want to listen to.
It's so contagious. Definitely.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
I hope your bread turns out super.
Thank you.
Heather, do you have some final encouragement to leave us with?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that women typically either have too much of a voice or not enough voice. And so that's a hard thing to speak to. And I'm not saying too much of a voice as in, you shouldn't speak up. But I think we can be too harsh. I know I can be. So I'm speaking, from personal experience, when I say that, but there's something about having balanced communication where you're able to say, this isn't right. I don't feel loved. I don't feel seen. And I'm not saying you're a horrible person, but something needs to change here. I think it's really important for women to have a voice, but I think it's equally important for them to listen.
Listening is very much underrated.
Yes, it is.
Heather, this has been really great. I am so glad that you chose to help people with their relationships and their marriages based on the things that you were learning in your own life.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming on to share a little of your expertise with us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been really fun.
Thanks for listening. Heather gave us so much good stuff to consider. What is your attachment style? Where are your thoughts leading you? Is shame keeping you from honesty and intimacy? Would counseling benefit your marriage in this season? These are all questions that I'm pondering right now. If you're interested in learning more about emotional honesty, Heather has a 12-part audio series called If I'm Honest. You can find it on her website. That link and all the ways to connect with Heather can be found in the show notes for today's episode. We've even included her peach pecan bread recipe. And remember, jump on my mailing list so that you know how and when to enter the GTL birthday giveaway next month. Friend, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your story and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. I will see you back here in 2 weeks, where we're going to keep talking about strengthening our marriages, this time with forgiveness and healing. Thanks for tuning in.